All right, we're live. We are live and we are barely on time, but we're here. I'm here and we're about to do this thing. So I'm going to try something. Fair use, fair use, fair use, because I'd like this video to be monetized. So fair use, fair use, fair use. The beat that I'm about to play is for entertainment purposes only, and it is by Kofi Kook. So if you guys like the instrumental and you want to get some, find some more like it, check out Kofi Kooks on YouTube. That's Kooks. All right. So fair use for entertainment purposes only. Let's see if that works. See if that works. And it's a hard beat too. All right, I was wondering why it was taking so long. It's just because it's duplicated on the same video. So that's that. Now that's that. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Um, so I set up the stream. I'm gonna do it. We're doing another collab, me and B Miles, and I think this time he's gonna really take the wheel on it. Of course, I have my 2 cents to add, and I'll try not to, be the one to be all long-winded, and because the last conversation was kind of my wheelhouse, and I really appreciate him letting me do that. So I'm gonna give him the opportunity to, cook up something of his own. So you guys stay tuned for that. We'll be doing that tomorrow night because hardly anybody ever goes live on Saturdays for some reason. And Saturday night seems to be like the most boring night on YouTube. And it's been that way consecutively for the last God knows how many years, because I've been on YouTube for God knows how many years. That's why they don't call me that, but I kind of feel like I'm, being shadow banned because they keep flagging all my channels. And then when I finally do get a channel that I'm able to keep, for some reason, my numbers don't really move. So I get it. I understand. And that's okay, because when my numbers were big, I was more of a target, and, weird things were happening. So at least this time I get to fly under the radar. The only thing that sucks is this is valid and valuable information that not enough people who should be getting this information are actually going to get. And that's the downside to it. And that's the way they play, because they need to keep everybody ignorant, because if they can keep everybody ignorant, well, they can continue with their bullshit, right? We have a problem with our judicial system, a major problem with our judicial system in many aspects. And we've seen it become very politicized in the last couple of years. But even before that, before the extreme politicization, I think that's the word. I think I'm saying that right. There has still been issues that people were complaining about with the judicial system. Like, for example, and this is my favorite example, excuse me, is black men getting longer prison sentences than non-black men for violent crimes. And we all chalked it up to racism, right? The system's just racist against black men. But then if that were the case, you would see a consistent pattern of white judges handing down these types of sentences, mostly, right? Exclusively. But that's not the case. We're seeing white judges and black judges do the exact same thing. So that led me to think, well, maybe there's more to it than just, racism, because that seems too simplistic. This system is a lot more complex than that, and the games they play and the way they weaponize the system against the people, it's never done prima facie, meaning whatever we perceive it as being is never the reason for it being. Like, for example, Trump with the mass deportations. A lot of people perceive that as being Trump is just getting rid of the illegals. There's too many illegal aliens, and whether they agree with Trump or not, that's what they perceive it as. Trump is getting rid of a certain specific group of people. But when you look at the real complexities of the issue and the way they're going about targeting certain individuals, you come to learn that it's more than just targeting the illegal aliens per se, but more about targeting domestic terror cells that are lying in wait and who have embedded themselves amongst the illegal aliens. So there's always more to it. So when we see this situation where black men get longer prison sentences than non-black men for the exact same crimes under the exact same circumstances, and we perceive it as racism for the cause of that, I don't believe that that's wholly the case. Maybe partially, but I don't think it's wholly the case. I believe it's a set of bad legislation that's been put on the books, and it was demanded by black people, and now it's being used against black men in particular. And we'll get into that because that's mainly what the show is going to be about. But we got some other things to talk about too. We got some other happenings. Republicans have just filed the Judicial Accountability Act to begin imprisoning judges who have repeatedly released violent offenders. So Republicans in Congress, of course, the Democrats are going to be against this because these are Democratic judges that are doing this. But Republicans in Congress are actually trying to do something about this corruption in the judicial system, as it's reared its ugly head once again in the form of extreme politicization. And to the right, there is an example of how these judges operate. And this is a liberal judge, of course, in the UK. And it says a British judge just sentenced a guy to 20 months in prison for some posts on Twitter. The same exact judge let a child rapist go free because she said prisons were overcrowded. The UK has fallen. Yes, the United Kingdom has fallen, and that's exactly what they want to turn America into if we allow these Democrats and these foreign infiltrators to take over our country. That's exactly what they're going to do here. They've taken over the UK, they've taken over Canada, they've taken over Australia, and we see all of these things happening in those places. What do you think is going to happen here if they're able to take over here? This is why being politically astute and knowledgeable and learning how to read the chessboard and understanding who's on your side and who's against you is so important, because the political system, the political administration that allowed this judge to get into power, the people consented to it because they thought it was a good idea. And now that good idea has backfired on them in the way that they've lost their free speech, and rapists have gained the right to rape children with impunity. If it were this judge presiding over the case, and the excuse is a piss poor excuse. So it's pretty obvious that this is the criminalization of free speech that we're witnessing. Because if the prisons are too crowded for a pedophile, why are they not too crowded for a regular guy posting some shit on Twitter? And this is where we're headed if we don't fix this shit. If we don't correct this shit and learn, if put it like this, if we don't learn how to de-rig this system, it's only going to get worse. Because there's judges in this country and there's prosecutors in this country that have already tried prosecuting people for their free speech. And if we allow the courts to get away with criminalizing people's free speech, we're all fucked. We're all in trouble. Which brings me to the subject of tonight's conversation: hate crimes. Yes, hate crime laws and hate crime sentencing guidelines are different, but, and the continuation of that is, but they're both part of the same legal framework or some shit like that. And what's led to black men getting longer prison sentences, what's led to that scenario is, I believe, before the hate crime thing even became, legislation, it was racism. But once the hate crime thing became legislation and it was legislated, I believe that the hate crime legislation, the laws as well as the guidelines, both have served to criminalize free speech. And the group of people who these laws were intended to protect have now fallen victim to the very same laws. And of course, I'll get into it because it's a really long, drawn out explanation. But the first thing we have to understand when it comes to the hate crime thing, the hate crime legislation, is we have to understand what the hate crime laws are and what constitutes a hate crime. And that's explained in the laws. And then we also have to understand the hate crime sentencing guidelines, how, when, and why they are applied. Because a lot of people are confused and they believe that somebody has to be charged with a hate crime in order to be subject to hate crime sentencing guidelines. But that's not the case. The case does not always have to be prosecuted as a hate crime for the guidelines to be applied. And if more people understood that, then more people would know where I'm going with this. So I'm going to try to help you guys understand it and take you to where I'm going. All right. But before we get started, I gotta stop the screen share real quick and start it up again. Window, gallery, window. All right, there we go. There we go. So before we get started, make sure you guys go subscribe to the Citizen Man backup channel. You will find that backup channel in the description box of every video on YouTube and Rumble. Follow me on Rumble. Rumble is where you'll find all the content that's not available to you on YouTube because of the censorship. So Rumble is my second home, so to speak, and there's a lot of good information over there. And of course, last but not least, if you guys would like to support the show, I encourage you to do so by sending in a kind donation via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo by using the tag scrolling across the screen in the banner below, the links that are pinned to the top of the YouTube chat in the black box where it says Citizen Man TV in yellow. Just click the yellow, the box opens up, and all the links are available. And that red X through the PayPal logo is just to remind you guys that PayPal does censor comments. So please be mindful of what you say in the comments and try to keep it surface level so they don't flag you or me or both of us, because they play like that. They've done that shit to me before. So that's what the red X is for, but the PayPal links are functional and operational. All right. So and of course, we have a set goal. I do have a set goal of 10 supporters per show, but of course, the numbers tend to be pretty low. So I don't expect to get 10 supporters per show, but I would like to at least get 5 supporters per show if that's more reasonable compared to the audience size. So let's see if we can reach that goal. And by supporters, I mean separate individuals, because if I say 5 donations, one person could send $1 5 times, and that's my 5 donations, and that cuts it off right there. So in order to maximize the productivity of my fundraising campaign, let's just call it that, the rules are as such: a minimum of 5 supporters, and they have to be 5 separate people. Simple as that. But if you want to donate twice, that's fine too. There's no rules against that. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. Let's get it started. All right. So first things first, I'm sure you guys have heard this going around on social media about Trump approving funding for Israel. Trump approves another $650 million to Israel. Congress approved it too. Well, that's kind of backwards because Congress approved it first and then Trump approved it. Trump has approved around $20 billion to Israel in under a year. And this is on top of the $4 billion they already get, which is set to double. Enjoy those 50-year mortgages. So this guy is putting it out there, and it's true. Trump has approved billions of dollars in funding to Israel. He has. And I already told you guys why. The country is held hostage by Israel. Trump can't really put up that much of a fight against Israel without risking major domestic terrorist attacks. And considering that these people have members of their groups who own large apartment buildings and skyscrapers and so on, well, they have access to thousands, tens of thousands, if not millions of vulnerable people that they can launch attacks against whenever they feel it necessary. Remember that apartment building that collapsed in South Florida? Guess who owned that building? Yeah. And guess why they collapsed that building? It was an assassination of one individual in one apartment, and they collapsed the entire building and killed several people. Well, not the entire building, but part of the entire building. One whole side of it. So They have the means and they have the capability. But there's more to this funding story than just Trump blindly giving money to Israel. And I don't know who that is in that picture, but that is not Donald Trump. So here's the real story. Trump approved $650 million for Israel. Let me see if I can grab this in the bigger gallery. Let me see. Dang it. I got to keep stopping the screen share and restarting it. All right. Maybe if I just keep it. No. All right. And this is why I kept the big gallery, because I wanted to have the ability to zoom in on these articles so you guys can see them. Because in the other gallery, I can get the slides in order. I just can't zoom in on them. That sucks. But here you go. Now you can see it. Let's see. President Donald J. Trump signed the fiscal year 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, into law on December 11th, 2025, approving a new wave of U.S. military support for Israel as regional fighting intensifies. The $900 billion defense package includes $650 million in supplemental assistance aimed at reinforcing Israel's capabilities during ongoing clashes with Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iranian-backed groups. Now, I want you guys to look at those numbers for a second. $650 million sounds like a lot of money, right? Because it is, right? But that's $650 million out of how much? $900 billion. So let me put it in perspective for you before you start losing your heads over Trump giving Israel money. Because honestly, I agree with you. He shouldn't be giving them anything. But considering the nature of their entrenchment here in the country, considering their the lethality, fatality capabilities, the lethal capabilities that they possess here in this country, I understand a little bit of capitulation. But look at the numbers. I'll put it in perspective for you. $6 and no. What is it? What would it be? What would it be? Out of $9. 65 cents out of $9. No, that would be if it was $9 billion or $90 billion. It's $900 billion. Let me see. Now I got to break out the calculator because I'm confusing myself. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's 900 million. 1, 2, 3. It's 900 billion. Divided by 650. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. $650 million. $1,384 times. So $650 million goes into 900 billion 1,384 times. So that's 1,000th of 9. Hold on. Okay, there we go. All right, I got it. So $650 million out of $900 billion would actually be 0.006 cents out of $9. So less than a penny out of $9 is what Trump gave to Israel. About a half a penny. So Trump signs the fiscal year National Defense Authorization Act for 2026, and he authorizes $9 in spending, and out of that $9, half a penny goes to Israel. So what are we so upset about? Really, what are we so upset about? That ain't shit. $20 billion out of $900 million. That's 20 cents out of $9. That's $20 out of $900. What are we so upset about? And remember, the equipment that the U.S. is giving Israel, it's not state of the art. It's not top of the line. It's not 100% functional. A lot of this shit's defective, and they still haven't replenished their Iron Dome missile defense system. Yeah, DC Legendary. I used to know math of very many moons ago. But then I started reading on these live streams, and then I lost my ability to do math. Apparently, I don't have the ability to do both. Read and do math. I can't. It's got to be one or the other. So I either have a book or a calculator, but never both. The funding. One of the largest single-year boosts in recent years focuses on replenishing munitions, stockpiles, expanding access to precision-guided weapons, and supporting critical defense systems strained by months of near-continuous conflict. Lawmakers advanced the measure on December 10th after weeks of negotiation, framing the support as an emergency step tied to evolving battlefield conditions. So half a penny out of $9 is for Israel to protect themselves against their enemies that surround them, right? But you also got to remember this. Trump made backdoor deals with the Taliban. He's got backdoor deals with the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, the Syrians. He's got backdoor deals with all of Israel's enemies, right? And he's also not going to use our military in any direct action in defense of Israel. It's not going to happen. He pretended to when he bombed Iran, but then when you go examine the sites in Iran that were bombed, they were already moved out and abandoned and empty former nuclear facilities that needed to be demolished. So Trump demolished them for them and then passed it off on the media as if he struck Iran on behalf of Israel. I showed you guys the streams about that too, and I showed you the receipts on the nuclear facilities that were already, abandoned. Now, why is Trump giving the money to Israel? Why is he doing this? To save face. He's doing it to save face because the Israeli Mossad has sleeper cells and terror cells all across the country, and they've had them since God knows when. And they know that Trump is not friendly or favorable towards them. So they're ready to strike. And although Trump has Homeland Security, the FBI, Homeland Security investigations, and ICE going after these sleeper cells, they don't have everybody yet. So they've not been 100% mopped up yet. So that threat still remains. The threat level has been reduced, but the threat still remains. And remember what Q said in the Q Clearance Patriot? The safety and well-being of every man, woman, and child in America is being closely guarded, and they're working to preserve the safety and well-being of every man, woman, and child in America. Well, part of that is preventing large-scale domestic terror attacks. Remember, these are the same people that did 9/11, lest we not forget. And remember, Trump was talking about there's going to be another 9/11 style attack sometime this month, lest we not forget. So he approves the funding, gives them their little half a penny, but where did the rest of the $900 billion go? Well, it went to our military and it went to Israel's enemies. That's where it went to. And this is not him writing checks and giving them money. This is military equipment. So if you want to say Trump is arming both sides, I guess you can say that. He's arming both sides, but one side is getting more armaments than the other side. But the other side is Israel, and that's the only one we keep hearing about because that's the one that's got everybody's panties in a bunch. Why is he still supporting Israel? Because those fucking Israelis will bomb us here in the United States because they own buildings and they own apartments and they own... Man, 9/11. 9/11. Are we forgetting 9/11? That's why it's got to be played this way. Because they have a tactical advantage against Trump in the way of domestic terror threats. So they're using that tactical advantage to squeeze as much money out of Trump as they can. And Trump has to give them the money. The same way if an armed robber stuck you up at the ATM and said, give me all the cash you just took out, guess what? You'll give it to him, won't you? And it'd be kind of silly to sit back and say, well, why did he give the robber his money? Because that robber had a gun to his nuts. That's why he gave him the money. I'd give the robber the money. And Israel is that robber with the gun to America's nuts. And this is why the deals with Israel's enemies is being done through the backdoor deals. And Iran has already dropped missiles on Israel this past summer. And I think they did it again this past fall, just a few weeks ago. And did America respond? Nope. Did Trump come to Israel's aid? Nope. And if you look at the amount of aid that Trump has given Israel and look at the amount of aid Obama gave Israel, Bush gave Israel, Clinton gave Israel, it pales in comparison. It's nowhere near it. In fact, I showed you guys the charts a few weeks ago with all the presidents and the aid that they gave to Israel throughout their presidential terms. And that entire graph starts trending down once Trump takes office in 2017. So he's still got to play ball to a degree. But we got to let the man work because he's the only one. He's the only one that's putting in any work. Every other president went along. So I'm not mad at him. A lot of conservatives are mad at him about the Israel shit, but that's because they're ignoring the terror threat. They're ignoring the fact that these are the same people that carried out 9/11. And they can and they will do it again. And guess who's going to be on the receiving end of that attack? We, the American public. We, the American people. So as we get mad at Trump for paying off the hostage takers, being the hostages, we should be glad that he's keeping the hostage takers and the domestic terrorists at bay. In other words, he has to do this or they'll start killing us. And remember, it would be in their best interest to start killing Americans because too many Americans are waking up anyway. So they need to reduce our numbers because the less of us that there are, guess what? Is the less of us that would be awake and able to speak out and expose them. But again, $650 million out of $900 billion is a half a penny compared to $9. So I wouldn't say they're top priority at all. The newly approved assistance is expected to accelerate delivery of high-demand equipment such as interceptor missiles, advanced artillery shells, and guidance kits. U.S. officials say the goal is to ensure Israel maintains operational readiness as it confronts simultaneous threats across multiple fronts, including escalating rocket fire from Lebanon and drone attacks attributed to Iranian proxies. So, basically, what they're saying here is Israel is already not only under threat, but under attack. So with Israel under attack, why isn't Trump sending our military to help them? And why is he only giving them half a penny in military aid out of all the military funding that he just approved? Because again, they are not priority. He's leaving them out to dry, but giving them just enough to keep them at bay from killing us. That's what he's doing. While the broader NDAA covers global defense priorities, and that's what global defense priorities means. It means funding our allies, both public and secret allies, including the enemies of Israel. The Israel allocation has drawn heightened attention given the scale of current fighting and the pace of U.S. material transfers since late 2024. Supporters of the bill emphasized its role in sustaining a key regional ally, while critics raised concerns about rising defense expenditures and the long-term implications of deepening U.S. involvement. So the only defense for giving Israel money is they're a key ally. They're not an ally. They are hostage takers. They have the country held hostage. And part of the narrative that the hostages are telling the hostage takers to say is, well, we're being treated well and they're our ally. What the fuck does Israel do for the United States? Not a goddamn. What has Israel? And look yourself in the mirror and say, what has Israel done for me? Not a fucking thing. With Trump's signature, the Pentagon is set to begin implementing the funding immediately, coordinating with Israeli defense officials to expedite procurement and delivery schedules. The administration has signaled that further assistance packages may be considered if the conflict continues to expand. And also, you guys have to remember, too, with these aid packages, it comes with stipulations. So once Israel signs off on acceptance of these transfers of weapons, they also have to sign off on the rules of what they can and cannot do with those weapons. And of course, they're going to violate the rules. But it's very hard for Trump to say no to Israel because, one, Congress can override him and pass that funding anyway. And two, if Trump doesn't do it, Trump becomes the sitting president to oversee the largest mass casualty event in U.S. history since 9/11. So it's either play ball or be the president to preside over the largest mass casualty event in U.S. history since 9/11. What are your options? Play ball. And honestly, I'd rather people be mad at Trump for giving Israel enough to keep him at bay than the people be mad at Trump because his administration couldn't stop the domestic terrorist attack that wiped out their family. I'd rather be mad at Trump about this than be mad about that. But that's just me, though. DC Legendary, people do not know how much of a threat Israel is. They don't know. All they know is Israel controls the media and they control the banks and they control the money. But what they don't know is that they also control the terrorist organizations that operate domestically. And that's the part that people are missing. And if more people understood that, they would be able to see where I'm coming from and how is it that I can still support Trump even though he's funding Israel, because I understand why he's doing it. Oh, shit. Wrong gallery. Got to go back to the other gallery. All right. This ain't so bad. I mean, I guess I can jump between screens. Okay. So, in other news, not only are the domestic terrorist organizations being mopped up, and there's still some that are out there functional and capable, but these Black Lives Matter people, they're getting arrested and indicted too. And this is just one of many. Tashella Dickerson charged with wire fraud for embezzling $3.15 million. Tashella Dickerson, the executive director of Black Lives Matter Oklahoma City, has been indicted by a federal grand jury on 20 counts of wire fraud and 5 counts of money laundering for allegedly embezzling over $3.15 million in returned bail funds and donations. According to the indictment, unsealed by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Oklahoma, Dickerson is accused of diverting funds intended for legal aid and social justice initiatives to her personal accounts between June 2020 and October 2025. The indictment details several instances of alleged misuse, including depositing return bail checks into personal accounts, purchasing 6 properties, funding recreational trips, and spending funds on food, a vehicle, and retail shopping. It is also alleged that Dickerson submitted false reports to the Alliance for Global Justice, AFGJ, the fiscal sponsor for Black Lives Matter OKC, claiming the funds were used for tax-exempt purposes. Dickerson could face up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine for each wire fraud count, and up to 10 years for each wire fraud count, and up to 10 years and additional fines for each money laundering count if convicted. She has appeared in court, was released on conditions, and has publicly attributed the allegations to quote-unquote haters. So this is not the first Black Lives Matter leader that we saw indicted for mishandling the money. And, well, there will be more. And, of course, Patrisse Cullors and the rest of them, we haven't heard from them because, well, the Pentagon, DOD, got them. Because they oversaw one of the largest domestic terrorist operations so far since 9/11 with the 2020 riots, and they had to be brought in. So they were snatched. But the rest of these people, they're going to be put through the civilian courts because their crimes are probably just as bad as they probably only go as far as stealing the money. Because that's what they were in it for. Yeah, pissed off cat. I heard about the Battle of Athens. Corrupt government and the veterans basically took up arms against them and beat them into submission. It's a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful thing. Now, Evan Kilgore, he said something very interesting. And he says, on my timeline is F. Candace Owens. Anyone supporting Candace is our enemy. Whoever shares Candace is a conspiracy theorist. Candace is evil. Unfollow everyone sharing Candace. Here's a list of everyone sharing Candace. The right, who are supposed to be the smart people, the conservatives, is starting to look like the left. And regardless of what you may think about Candace Owens or how you may feel about Candace Owens at the current moment, I don't have a problem with Candace Owens. If she puts out a theory that I disagree with, I disagree with it. But a lot of the stuff that she puts out, she puts it out the same way I do, with research behind it. So it's very hard to discount what she's saying. And she has proven herself time and time again to be a trusted source of information, especially more of a trusted source of information than the people that are criticizing her at the current moment. And I've noticed this unusual wave of Candace Owens hate, popping up on my Facebook feed that was never there before. And all these new accounts that I never seen before. So these are troll accounts and bot accounts as far as I'm concerned. And I've been seeing a lot of so-called conservatives buying into this narrative, engaging in the groupthink. And it all started once she started questioning Charlie Kirk's murder. And I'm glad that she's going about it the way that she's going about it, as if Charlie Kirk is actually dead, even though we on our side of things believe that Charlie Kirk faked his death to avoid actually being killed. And there's ample evidence to support that theory. I'm glad that Candace Owens is taking the whole Charlie Kirk is dead angle, because the people who wanted him dead and possibly may believe that he's dead, They are starting to show their true colors. The more she calls them out, is the more they, you know the saying, hit dogs holler? That's kind of what's happening. And for a while, I believe that Charlie Kirk's wife, Erica Kirk, may not have been involved in his death, but now I'm starting to think otherwise because she's joined in the anti-Candace Owens mantra and, went on an interview saying that she wants Candace Owens to stop what she's doing. But why would she want Candace Owens to stop what she's doing when all Candace Owens is doing is investigating your husband's murder? Do you not want to know who murdered your husband? And that sounded a lot to me like the people who wanted to silence the 9/11 truth movement. And what they would say was questioning the official story was somehow disrespectful to the victims. So let me get this straight. Not believing the lie we were told about how these people were killed is disrespectful to the people who were killed. So that means every homicide detective that's trying to solve the murder of someone's loved one is actually disrespecting the victim every time they ask a question about the murder. That's essentially what they're saying. And anybody that's trying to pull that wool over your eyes and make you believe that, they're dishonest and they're not to be trusted. And I don't trust Erica Kirk anymore. I don't trust Erica Kirk anymore. And I believe Erica Kirk may have had a hand in Charlie getting killed. I mean, if you really think about it, how many American marriages consist of unhappy women that would rather not have their husbands around? And if they can get paid, get some shine and some spotlight and some clout off of their husband being deleted, why not? So it's not too far-fetched to believe that his own wife would have wanted him out of the picture. Happens all the time. Or here's the other side of it, right? Which would allow me to still trust Erica Kirk. Maybe Erica Kirk is under the same threat from the same people that killed her husband. And she's being forced to take the anti-Candace Owens position. That's a possibility too. But I believe that if that were the case, she would never have been pro Candace from the beginning. Because in the beginning, she was all right with Candace Owens talking about Charlie Kirk's murder and who might have potentially been behind it. But at some point in time, her narrative changed. Which means something happened that changed her mind and made her disagree with Candace. Could it be that the Mossad got to her and they threatened her and then she had to change her tune? Quite possibly. Or could it be that she saw it to be more beneficial to go against Candace rather than side with Candace? But the fact is, Candace Owens is investigating her husband's death, and she has a problem with that. So she can't be trusted. So all this Candace Owens hate that you're seeing on social media, and listen, whether you agree with Candace or you disagree with Candace, I think as conservatives, we should respect Candace Owens enough to disagree with her and just let her have her opinion rather than actively engaging in trying to shut her down or trying to cancel her or trying to silence her. Because on the right, on the conservative side of things, we don't do that. That's liberal shit. That's what liberals do. They're the ones in a hurry to silence people they don't agree with. So all those calls on social media to shut Candace Owens down, I don't believe they're coming from genuine conservatives. I believe they're coming from liberal infiltrators posing as conservatives. And what they're trying to do is create division amongst conservatives. And I see it working. But you let Candace Owens tell it. She says, And it's just not working, which is driving them more mad. They have deployed every possible Soviet tactic to convince us not to believe our own eyes, and it is failing. And it's funny because Emmanuel Macron and the French government were said to have had some involvement in the Charlie Kirk incident in terms of orchestrating the assassination. And not only did Candace Owens expose that, but shortly before that, Candace Owens was on a ruthless campaign exposing the fact that Emmanuel Macron's wife is actually a grown man, an older man. And that was really stirring the headlines and making some waves. And then all of a sudden, here's this big anti-Candace hate campaign on social media. And we all should know better by now. By the time, from the time we see that hate campaign, kick into high gear and the engines of the hate campaign fire up and the hate campaign is running at 100 miles an hour, something's wrong. And the person who's the target of that hate campaign, they're on to something. They just exposed or discovered something that should be exposed. So I think instead of falling for the Candace Owens hate, I think we should actually pay attention to what she's been trying to say. And honestly, I don't think Candace Owens knows that Charlie Kirk faked his death. I think she genuinely believes that he's dead. And because she genuinely believes this, she's going to investigate it and expose everybody who was involved in orchestrating it. Now, my theory on Charlie Kirk is that he faked his death with the help of the U.S. military and the Egyptian military, who were sworn enemies of the Israelis. And it was portrayed as if the Israelis, the Zionists, carried it out and were successful in order to get them off of Charlie's back and get him to stop targeting him and his family, and also to lure all the potential assassins to that very same place. So when the staged assassination happens, everybody's in a state of confusion. All the shooters are there. They get photographed. They get exposed. They get identified. So any future attempts at an assassination, now they have that many less shooters to call on to carry it out. It was a sting operation. Because they knew that day at that location, they were planning, the Zionists and their cohorts were planning to assassinate Charlie Kirk. And because Charlie Kirk and his people knew that ahead of time, they set it up to where they staged it to make it look like he got killed for real. And this is why all the evidence against Tyler Robinson seems so shaky. And people are now beginning to question whether Tyler Robinson, whose court case actually just started, whether Tyler Robinson actually was the shooter or not. Because there were multiple shooters in multiple locations, in multiple positions. Because they were lured there. They were all told that you get to carry out this hit and this is what you're getting paid. Be here and do that shit. They got there and they saw the shit happen and they weren't the ones that did it. But they were there ready to do it, which is incriminating enough. And this is why the FBI has been so wishy-washy about what they're putting out to the public. This is why the story of the bullet hitting Charlie's neck has been so weird. First it came from the back, then it came from the side, and it lodged in his neck because for some reason vertebrae in your neck can stop a 30-06, which can tear the head off a freaking elephant if you hit it in the right spot. But Candace Owens is basically giving the public a bird's eye view of who is all involved and who all we should be expecting to see go down in the near future. And they hate her. They hate her. Now, Candace Owens also claims that Nick Fuentes is a Fed. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Nick Fuentes, but I'm not too fond of Nick Fuentes. I'm not much of a fan of his. Even though we're both conservatives and we agree on a lot of things, I don't listen to him. I don't listen to him. And the reason why I don't listen to him is because, one, I don't believe he's got anything to say that I can learn from that I don't already know. Not to sound arrogant, but just being real. And also, his style and the audience he appeals to is not really my type of vibe. And he says a lot of things that, some of which may be true, but some are exaggerations. And he makes it very easy for the liberals to say, see, look at these racist conservatives. And then they use Nick Fuentes as an example. And you can go into the archives and see videos of Nick Fuentes saying things that could be said more articulately, but he's deliberately saying them in such a way that they can easily be interpreted as racism. So I believe he's there to try to be a caricature that personifies the left's claims about the right. And I never trusted him for that fact and for that reason. And he also claims to be a virgin. I don't believe it. I don't believe him. Not for a fucking second. The guy that talks like that, he ain't no fucking virgin. Elon Musk said Nick Fuentes is a Fed. And Candace Owens says, I'm not an Elon fan, but he's telling you guys the truth about Nick. He works with the feds and was working with them on January 6th. No way to deny that. So I don't know how you guys feel about Nick Fuentes, but I've always had a weird vibe about that dude and could never trust that dude and always felt like he couldn't be trusted. And here we have Elon Musk and Candace Owens both saying pretty much the same thing. So just wanted to throw that out there. Now, the next story I have to cover is this woman, Bevelyn Beatty. Bevelyn Beatty is a black woman from Tennessee, and she was in New York City protesting abortion. And she was protesting outside of an abortion clinic, and this was during the Biden era, outside of an abortion clinic, trying to encourage women who are going in there to have abortions to not have the abortions. Yeah, another thing I didn't like about Nick Fuentes, DC, legendary, is he involves himself in the red pill manosphere talking points, but for a man that's never had pussy, it's kind of weird to be talking about relationships between men and women when you yourself has never had an intimate relationship with a woman. That's kind of weird. Like, I can't really care much for your opinion at that point because you've never dealt with women. Like, put it like this. As a grown man, the only way you can qualify to really talk about relationships between men and women is if you've experienced a woman in every aspect, right? Emotionally, physically, psychologically, and sexually. Because women treat you different when you're sleeping with them. They do. So if you've never slept with a woman, as Nick Fuentes claims he hasn't, well, you've never experienced that side of a woman. So the majority of your views on women is probably going to be negative because you've spent your entire life dealing with a bunch of women that didn't want to sleep with you. At least that's what it appears to be if his claim is true, but I don't believe him. I think he just says that for shock value. But again, If you never fucked a woman, you don't have, you're missing a large part of the perception that men have of women. Women treat you different when you're banging them. They do. But anyway, so Bevelyn Beatty was protesting outside of a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic in New York City. And this was during the Biden years. And she was arrested and sentenced to 40 months in prison. That's 3 years and 4 months in prison. Like, she was put in prison for protesting, and they claimed that what she was doing was blocking access to the clinic. But she wasn't. They just didn't want her out there encouraging women not to abort their children. And especially they didn't want a black woman out there encouraging women not to abort their children. Because abortion was aimed at black women to exterminate the black population. These were the words of Margaret Sanger herself, the founder of Planned Parenthood. So the last thing these Democrats wanted was a black woman publicly protesting and going viral in her public protest against abortion. So they locked her up with 3 years in prison. And Trump just pardoned her. So she is out and she is free. So shout out to Trump. And this is the type of shit where, you know, we have to show people when they try to claim, oh, Trump's a racist, Trump's a racist. And you know what I say? I've taken a different tune, because before I used to say, well, no, Trump's not a racist. Look, he's always looking out for black folks. But you know what? I changed my tune on that. You know what I say? I say Trump is a racist. But he's not a racist in the conventional sense that we think of it as, you know, a white man that's a white supremacist that hates all non-whites. No. Trump's not a racist in that sense. He's racist in a nationalistic sense. He's racist against foreigners. Yep, he sure does. Because he made public statements back in I think it was either the 80s or the 90s, but it was back when he was young. And he was talking about the Native Americans, the $5 Indians, and he said, hey, they don't look like Indians to me. Because he knows what time it is, but he can't come out and say it. He can't come out and say it. And yes, America First is racist against foreigners. And I don't have a problem with that. You know why? Because I'm racist against foreigners too. Especially foreigners that hop the border, come over here, and start sucking up all the resources. If you're going to come over here, don't come over here and be a foreigner and try to rule over us. You come over here and become an American like the rest of us. That's how respect works. So racist wouldn't even be the correct word. Nationalist is what he is. But I remember when the word white nationalist was created by Don Lemon on CNN. I remember that moment because that was back when I had cable during Trump's first term, and CNN was on TV, and it was a clip of Trump making a speech, and he said, "I am a nationalist." Those were his exact words. And then it cut to Don Lemon, and Don Lemon was on there looking all shocked, clutching his pearls, and then he goes, "You mean white nationalist?" And then the next day, all over mainstream media, white nationalist. Trump calls himself a white nationalist. And then all of a sudden, this whole idea of white nationalist became popularized. And it all stemmed from Don Lemon taking Trump's speech out of context and putting words in the man's mouth. Trump has never used the term white nationalist ever once in all of his public appearances. Never once. That came from Fag Lemon. And as Americans, there's nothing wrong with being a nationalist, because a nationalist simply means you have your nation's best interest at heart. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And to have foreigners mad at Trump because he wants to put Americans first is insane. That's like your neighbors getting mad at you because you pay your bills, your own bills, and you don't want to pay theirs. That's how ridiculous that is. And in reality, that doesn't happen. But for some reason, the liberal political establishment wants you to believe that there's something wrong with looking out for your nation and your own people. And they try to use black people as a weapon against Trump by pushing this whole Trump is a racist narrative. How do you think they got to shut down the border wall back in 2018? By saying it's racist and Trump is a racist for not letting all these foreign people from South and Central America into the country. And it was black people that were advocating for the borders to be open because Trump wanted the borders closed. I even had a debate with Brother Sanchez on his show in 2018 about the borders being open and the border wall being built, or 2019, one of those years. And I was getting called all kinds of coons and sellouts for saying black people are going to be harmed the most by these open borders. And what happened? The Democrats opened up the borders when Biden came in. Mind you, black people voted for Biden in overwhelming numbers. And they even helped cheat for Biden in a lot of cases, in a lot of districts. Biden opened up the borders. All these foreigners came in and they flooded the black communities. The crime wave that came with them, the black community started falling victim to it. Now everybody wants to complain. But I thought the wall was racist. I thought closing the border was racist. I thought these were your people. I thought you had the black and brown alliance. What happened? They had to learn the hard way. And us conservatives that were warning about this so many years ago, they were busy calling us names because we support the orange man. And it wasn't until the consequences started to hit home that they realized just how wrong they were. And now they've changed their tune. And now that Trump is carrying out the mass deportation operations, the fake news media is still trying to get black people to defend these illegals being here. And there's still a large number of foolish black folks defending these illegals being here. And they're trying to spread lies like, oh, after Trump is done deporting all the illegals, they're coming after black people next. That's the dumbest shit ever. Because Trump has a case with the Supreme Court right now to do away with birthright citizenship for illegals. Because birthright citizenship was meant for black people exclusively. Because they were slaves. And they were not considered citizens or granted equal protection under the Constitution. And birthright citizenship in the 14th Amendment was created to remedy that. It wasn't created to invite foreigners over here to have babies and call themselves Americans. It was created for the black Americans who were already here and who were enslaved on their own land and stripped of their constitutional rights on their own land to be granted their constitutional rights. That's who it's for. And then you got these goofy ass black liberals mad at Trump about that. Oh, he want to take away birthright citizenship so he can deport y'all. Sound like a fucking idiot. Sounds stupid. And to the liberals that are defending the illegals, y'all motherfuckers sound stupid. So let me get this straight. Just because you hate Trump, you would defend mass numbers of foreigners coming into your country, occupying housing in your neighborhoods, forcing you out, taking jobs that the people in the local community should be earning a living from, and being given vast amounts of taxpayer-funded welfare. You all right with that? When these motherfuckers owe y'all reparations for slavery? You know all the money that the sanctuary cities gave to the illegals in welfare? If they took all that money and gave it to black people for reparations for slavery, that argument will be over. Reparations could have been paid. And there's black folks out there that ignore this fact and still defend the illegals. That shit is crazy to me. That's what I say, David. Deport them all. Get them all the fuck out of here. Like, that was the biggest slap in the face to black folks. And there's still people out there that don't see it, did not see it. And they're falling for the fake news narrative that ICE is going to come after black people afterwards. Like, no, they're not. No, they're not. If you're a citizen, you're a citizen. And all the stories about ICE detaining American citizens, I don't know if you paid attention to those headlines, but it always says detained. It never says arrested or jailed or deported. It says detained. And you know why they get detained? Because of their own dumbass behavior. Because ICE's job is to check your status in the United States. So when they stop you, they'll ask you for your name and your date of birth. Then they'll go back to their computer. They'll run your name and your date of birth, see that you have legal status, see that you're a citizen and you have a legitimate social security number, and then they send you on your way. That's all it takes. But the people who end up getting put in cuffs and getting detained are the ones that refuse to give their information. So they take a simple process and they overcomplicate it, they escalate it, and then they cry about the results and the repercussions. Now, granted, I'm not in favor of government agents being able to stop and ID you. I don't like that shit at all. But I also understand that we're actively engaged in warfare. We have a foreign invading army operating in our nation. And efforts are being made by our government to get rid of those foreign invaders. So these are special circumstances that require special powers in order to effectively execute the mission. So in understanding that these are exigent circumstances, your compliance is to your benefit. Unfortunately, because we allowed this mess. So now we have to go through the suffering of cleaning up that mess. Now, if we didn't have millions and millions of illegals flooding across the border in the 4 years Biden's auto pen was in office, then I would be against government agents running the streets and cities IDing, randomly IDing people. I'd totally be against it. Because there'd be no legitimate reason for it. But there's a legitimate reason for it now. There's millions of people residing and operating in the country who aren't supposed to be here. And many of them aren't here for good reasons. They're here to commit crime and do evil and do harm to Americans. So it's an unsafe situation either way. But I guarantee you, as much as I disagree with being stopped and ID'd by the government, if I got stopped by ICE and ID'd, I'd give them my name and my birth date. You know why? Because I want them to run my shit and see that I'm legit and send me on my way. Rather than give them a hard time and make them believe I might be an illegal, have them arrest me, take me down to the facility and all that shit just to find out who the fuck I am when I could have just told them. And again, we wouldn't have this problem if Trump was allowed to build the fucking wall. If Trump was allowed to secure the borders in his first term, we would not have had this problem. This is a problem we created, and now we got to pay the price to help solve it. That's what it boils down to me. Now, speaking of government corruption, wouldn't you know, the DEA's chief financial director under Obama, Paul Campo, who resigned in 2016 ahead of Trump's administration, had his Virginia home raided and has been charged for agreeing to launder $12 million for the CJNG, a Mexican cartel, while acting in his role at the DEA. So one of Obama's DEA heads was working for the cartels. This is why they were so protected in past administrations. This is why they were able to operate with impunity in past administrations, because in past administrations, they were flooded with individuals who were willing to work with them, aid, and abet them. Shout out to Elsine for the Venmo. She says, best wishes. Appreciate you, Elsine. So we got our first donation of the night. Shout out to Elsine. If we can get any more, that'd be great. That'd be great. And remember Eric Holder getting caught up with Operation Fast and Furious, selling American guns to Mexican drug cartels? They were in league with the cartels, and they were working with the cartels the entire time. And the few cartel bosses that got busted during the Obama years, those were the competition. Those were the guys that were working in opposition to the cartels that Obama and them were working with. And not only were they involved in the drug trafficking and the money laundering, but they were involved in the human trafficking and the child trafficking too. And this is proof positive, because people were saying it the whole time. Throughout Obama's administration, people were saying it. This guy's working with the cartels. This guy's he's letting in all the drugs. And honestly, with this in mind, I believe everybody under Obama's DEA should be investigated. And every federal drug case that was brought before the courts under Obama needs to be re-examined. But that's just my opinion. Because when you got people like this that high up in your administration, that high up in the agency that's supposed to be working against the drug dealers, and they're working for the drug dealers, well, that explains why the drug dealers became so wealthy and powerful during the time of this administration, because they were protected. They were protected and facilitated. And I'm pretty sure this guy ain't the only one. He's just the one we're hearing about because he's probably got the most minimal of charges. And I'm quite sure there's more people from the Obama administration that got bigger charges that we're not hearing about. And that's probably because they're cooperating witnesses. Now, speaking of human smuggling and child trafficking, I put this on my community tab a few days ago, but I thought I'd share it on the show for those of you who may not have seen my community post. Joe M. says, Tariffs allowed every shipping container coming in and out of the U.S. to be weighed and x-rayed. This is about stopping child trafficking. Do you see now? Now, most people are wondering, well, weren't they already at least x-raying these shipping containers to begin with? Well, yes, they were. But the x-raying of the containers was done through random selection. So not every container coming into the country was being scanned. But now, because of the tariffs are an import tax applied to every single good being shipped into the country. So now, because of the tariffs, it's now mandatory for the contents of every container coming into the country to be verified. Well, coming in and going out, in order for the tariffs to be properly and accurately applied. So they had the capability before to scan every container coming in and out of the country, but they only did it through random selection because it was done by their own at their own discretion. But now, because of the tariffs, the scanning of every container is now mandatory. So not only are the tariffs raising enough revenue to offset the income tax, to the point where Trump is talking about abolishing the income tax, but the tariffs are now going to help stop the human trafficking because they ship people in these containers. And now they'll no longer be able to. Breaking news. Pramila Jayapal, who's a member of Congress and born to foreign parents, but born on U.S. soil. So she got her citizenship by being an anchor baby. She just announced a new bill backed by over 123 Democrat co-sponsors in the House to completely eliminate the ability of Department of Homeland Security to detain illegal aliens and require illegals be given taxpayer-funded lawyers. So Jayapal, a foreign infiltrator herself, is announcing legislation to benefit the foreign infiltrators. And this is problematic. But this is the mentality of the Democrat Party as a whole. This is what the Democrat Party is all about. And the reason why they're so supportive of the illegals is because the illegal aliens are going to be the new slave class that they get to rule over. Because too many Americans are waking up. And if Trump's birthright citizenship case in the Supreme Court succeeds, which I'm going to give you guys a rundown on that probably Sunday night, we'll probably discuss that. If his case succeeds, that means that Jayapal's parents, who came here on, I think it was student visas or work visas, temporary visas, and gave birth to her, she will be stripped of her citizenship because she did not gain rightful legal birthright citizenship. And if she's stripped of her citizenship and she doesn't have a green card, well, she's going to be removed from the country and no longer be able to serve in office. And there's plenty other members of Congress just like her who will be stripped of their citizenship and no longer able to serve in Congress. But this is absolutely unacceptable. Unacceptable. And these are the same Democrats that were in support of the crime bill, locking up all the black folks. They were mad at Trump for the First Step Act and the Second Step Act, letting these people out of prison. And they were mad at Trump for not wanting to open up the borders and let all the illegals in. And now they want to give them free reign. Free reign and free handouts. Any American, you don't have to be a Republican, but any American at this point that supports the Democratic Party, they are either lost or they just truly, genuinely hate America. That's the only way I can see it. I can't see it any other way. Like, you have to hate America to support the party that would put foreigners over their own people. Now, to the crooked judicial system, these crooked judges, man, oh man, oh man. Republicans have just filed the Judicial Accountability Act to begin imprisoning judges who have repeatedly released violent offenders. So the Republicans are making a move to try to clean up the court system and get rid of this politicization that's literally putting the public at risk. All these crazy stories we heard about these crazy people committing violent crimes, and you look at the person's back, the attacker or the perpetrator's background, and they have a long rap sheet, been arrested 1,000 times, and for some reason are still not in prison. They're still on the street. Well, that's due to these crooked judges that are on the deep state payroll and are serving the agenda of destroying America from within. But now legislation is being put in place to remedy this, and hopefully this legislation passes. Because judges like that, I believe they are criminal. Because they have the power to put these people in prison. And if they choose not to put these people in prison, and somebody else gets hurt at this person's, at the hands of this person that the judge released, I believe the judges should be held liable as well for failing to execute their duties. Now, granted, the judge can't see into the future and see that this person is going to reoffend, but the judge does have access to their criminal record and can see all the offenses. And if it was an honest judge who took that into account, they would understand that if I let this person back out on the street, there's a chance they might hurt somebody else, so I'll lock them up. But these judges ignore the history of violence, let these people back out because they know they're going to commit more violence. And it's sad when you can't even trust the judicial system. And of course, this one from over in the UK, the judge locked this guy up for 20 months for Twitter posts. Meanwhile, let a child rapist go because she said the prison was too full. This is where we're headed. Without legislation like this, this is what it'll become. Now, speaking of legislation, the hate crime sentencing guidelines and the hate crime laws. Let's get to the crux of the discussion tonight. Black men get longer prison sentences for the same violent crimes under the same circumstances as, let's say, their white counterparts. It's not just racism. It's a lot more than racism. And the hate crime legislation is what is at the heart of this rigging of the justice system. Now, the hate crime laws came about as a result of black people going to the government asking for help against these racist Klan members that were still attacking them. The government saw an opportunity to write legislation that can later be used against these very same black folks. In comes the hate crime laws and the sentencing guidelines that accompany those laws. And what a lot of us don't understand is the difference between the two. So we'll start there, right? So the question I asked Google is written in red there at the top of the screen. It says, are hate crime sentencing guidelines different from hate crime laws? Google AI says, yes, hate crime laws and hate crime sentencing guidelines are different, but related components but related components of the legal system. Hang on a second. The phone's being goofy. Try to get my Rumble stream back up. They're playing a commercial. How about it? So this is where a lot of people get confused because they don't know the difference between the hate crime laws and the hate crime sentencing guidelines. And if you don't understand this basic fundamental fact, then there's no way for you to begin to understand the rest of what I'm going to discuss. So hate crime laws are the actual statutes that define what constitutes a hate crime, often by adding the element of bias motivation to an underlying crime, like assault or vandalism. These laws are enacted by legislatures, both state and federal. Hate crime sentencing guidelines are rules or standards used by judges to determine the specific punishment once a defendant has been convicted under a hate crime law. These guidelines often provide for enhanced penalties, meaning the sentence for a bias-motivated crime will be harsher than for the same crime without the bias element. Right? So the bias element and the bias in the bias motivation is what determines whether this crime is a hate crime, will be prosecuted as a hate crime, and or sentenced as a hate crime. Now, the next question: can hate crime sentencing guidelines be applied to any violent crime? And the reason why I asked that question in that specific way is because if it's being prosecuted as a hate crime, then it's a given that the sentencing guidelines will be applied. But the question I was asking here was, if it's not prosecuted as a hate crime, can the guidelines still be applied? Right? So can hate crime sentencing guidelines be applied to any violent crime? Yes. Hate crime sentencing guidelines enhance penalties for specific violent crimes and property crimes when motivated by bias against protected traits, race, religion, etc. But they don't replace the underlying crime. They add to it, applying only when the perpetrator's bias is the reason for targeting the victim. Not all violent acts, which is why laws target the motivation, not just the hatred. These enhancements add extra time to sentences for crimes like assault or murder if bias is proven under both federal and state laws. How hate crime sentencing works. Underlying crime. A crime like assault, robbery, or murder is committed. Bias motivation. The perpetrator intentionally targeted the victim because of their race, religion, sexual orientation, gender, disability, or national origin. Sentence enhancement. Judges apply federal or state guidelines like U.S. Sentencing Commission guidelines, section 3A1.1 to increase punishment. Example, adding 3 levels for the original crime. Key distinctions. Not all violence. Hate crime laws don't apply to every violent crime. They only apply when bias is the driving force, differentiating them from heat of passion or typical gang violence. Now, that's not exactly true, and we'll get to that. Federal and state. Both federal and state laws exist, covering different sets of crimes and protected characteristics, though federal law expanded significantly with the Matthew Shepard Act. And mind you, the Matthew Shepard Act was a bunch of fags that killed each other, that killed Matthew Shepard because they were fucking each other's boyfriends or whatever. It had nothing to do with the fact that the man was gay, but they passed it off that way. Examples: an assault motivated by racism gets enhanced sentencing. A non-biased assault does not. In essence, hate crime guidelines are a tool for increased punishment for biased violence, not a separate category that covers every single violent act, right? So they keep saying if the assault is motivated by this or motivated by that, right? But what they're not saying is who determines what this crime is motivated by. And who determines that is the judge. Hence my next question. Can hate crime sentencing guidelines be applied at a judge's discretion? Meaning, does the judge have the power to decide in a criminal case that's been convicted already whether hate crime sentencing guidelines apply to this person or not? And the short answer is yes, the judges can do it. But this is what Google AI told me. In the U.S. legal system, the application of hate crime sentencing enhancements involves a blend of mandatory guidelines and judicial discretion, varying between federal and state jurisdictions. So under federal law, the United States sentencing guidelines are advisory, not mandatory, meaning judges have the discretion to deviate from the suggested sentencing range. In other words, if you're convicted of punching somebody in the face, it's up to the judge whether he's going to sentence you with the hate crime enhancements or not. The judge decides that. Fact finding. A hate crime enhancement is triggered when the finder of fact at trial, the jury, or the judge in the case of a guilty plea, determines the offense was motivated by bias beyond a reasonable doubt. So the judge or the jury gets to decide if you get a hate crime sentencing, if the sentencing guidelines apply. But it's more on the judges than the jury, because the jury's determine innocence or guilt and the judge sets the sentence. So it's mainly in the hands of the judge. Judicial role. Once a hate crime motivation is established, the guidelines direct an increase of at least 3 offense levels. However, the judge ultimately decides the final sentence and can go above or below the guideline range if specific aggravating or mitigating circumstances are present, provided they explain their reasons in writing. And that part there where the judge would explain their reasons in writing, they don't always do that when they apply hate crime sentencing guidelines to the sentencing, right? Now, I know you guys are thinking hate crime, hate crime, hate crime. This was about black people. About white people victimizing black people. How could they possibly use this against black people? Well, we'll get to that in a second. And guys, make sure y'all hit that like button. If y'all haven't hit that like button, we got 49 watching and 28 likes on YouTube. Hit that like button, y'all. And on Rumble, I'm seeing 10 in the Rumble chat and 8 likes. That's pretty good. So we're getting the likes up to match the viewership in Rumble. That's good. So keep hitting that like button, Rumblers. And keep hitting that like button, YouTubers. We can get more people in here. So state laws. State laws vary widely, with some giving judges more discretion than others. Discretionary enhancements. Some states explicitly give the court discretion to apply an additional prison term for a hate crime. Mandatory consideration. Other states may require that a hate crime finding be considered a specific aggravating circumstance in sentencing, which still allows the judge to determine the weight of that factor in the overall sentence. I don't know if you guys understood that, but discretionary enhancements, the states explicitly give the court discretion to apply an additional prison term for a hate crime. And when they say for a hate crime, That does not necessarily mean a crime being prosecuted officially as a hate crime, but rather a crime in which the judge himself determines that hate or bias was a motivating factor, which honestly is any crime. Because if somebody sticks me up at gunpoint and armed robs me, commits an armed robbery against me, yeah, they hated me because they pointed a gun at me and threatened my life. And and they were biased against me because I had more money than them. So wouldn't every violent crime be motivated by hate and bias to some degree? These are very broad terms that could be applied any way you want to, any way you want them to. Mitigating circumstances. Many state rules allow a judge to strike or dismiss an enhancement if they find significant mitigating circumstances and state those reasons on the record. Summary of discretion. Charging decision. The initial decision to pursue a hate crime charge or enhancement rests with the prosecutor, who has broad discretion. And of course, not every violent crime is prosecuted as a hate crime. But in every violent crime conviction, the judge has the ability to determine whether it was a hate crime and use the enhancements for sentencing or not. Fact determination. Whether a crime was motivated by bias is a factual determination made by the jury or the judge during trial or plea. That's essentially what I just said. Sentencing application. Judges have considerable discretion in applying the final sentence, even with hate crime laws. So that means they can apply it without the hate crime laws. They use the established facts and guidelines as a framework, but can fashion a sentence based on the individual case's unique circumstances. In other words, they can use hate crime sentencing guidelines simply based on the facts of the case and statements made, rather than based off of whether the prosecutor charged this crime as a hate crime or not. This is where the fun begins. And this is where my explanation is going to really start to blow your mind now that you have a basic idea of the laws versus the guidelines. So, does a defendant have to be informed? This was the question that I asked. I forgot to write it out in red like I did on the other ones. But the question was, does the defendant have to be informed that they're being sentenced under hate crime sentencing guidelines? And the answer was indictment and charges. The specific hate crime charge is usually filed early in the process. Sentencing phase. Even if not a separate charge, the prosecutor will typically bring up the hate crime enhancement during sentencing, presenting evidence of bias to the judge. In essence, it's not just about the original crime, but the reason for it, and the reason must be clearly communicated for the legal process to be fair. Well, here's what really happens. The prosecutor would usually file the hate crime early in the process. Keyword is usually, which means they don't always do it. The other keyword that I have underlined there, even if not a separate charge, the prosecutor will typically bring up the hate crime enhancement during sentencing. Typically, which means not always, which means this is also at their discretion. And they typically, usually don't bring it up, at least not directly. They'll bring it up indirectly. And here's how. They'll read witness statements and quotes from the defendant themselves in their closing arguments. And if the quotes from the defendants or witness statements claiming what they heard the defendant say contains any evidence of bias motivation, the judge now can hand down an enhanced sentence without even informing the defendant that this excessive sentence that you're getting is based on the hate crime sentencing guidelines. So in other words, they're supposed to tell the defendant that, hey, you're getting this hate crime enhancement on your sentence, but they don't tell the defendants that. And the reason why they don't tell the defendants that is because if they don't tell the defendant, there's no way for the defendant to defend themselves against it, because the defendant has no idea that this legislation even exists or is even being applied in the manner to which it's being applied. And they want longer sentences because they need to keep those prison beds full so they can keep making money from the private prisons. Most of these judges have money invested in the private prison system. So as long as they keep business booming, they keep getting paid. Now, again, the big question is, how was this applied to black people? How is this used against black people? Well, I'll tell you right now. The hate crime laws and the sentencing guidelines were put on the books in the around the late 1980s, early 1990s. What was happening at the same time was hip hop was starting to become extremely popular, and a certain subgenre of hip hop was starting to emerge and become even more popular. And that would be your gangster rap. And what gangster rap did was it helped to usher in the casual use of the word nigga amongst black people. We went from calling each other brother to calling each other nigga. And as the use of the word nigga became more common amongst the street element of black folks, mainly black men, the courts now had already had a legal definition for the word nigga. Because remember, when the hate crime sentencing guidelines were put on the books and the hate crime laws were put on the books, it was because black people were still being attacked by racist Klansmen that called them niggers and did violent things to them. And so nigger was documented in the courts under the legal definition of racial slur. There is no other legal definition for it. Now, in mainstream society, there are two definitions for it: racial slur and term of endearment. But in the eyes of the courts, it's only a racial slur and nothing more. So as black men began to use the word nigga casually as a term of endearment, when they would come before the courts as being charged with a violent crime and they were convicted and their sentences were handed down, the judge would literally do a nigga history check to determine whether this person uses the word nigga or not. And if the determination is that, yes, this person uses the word nigga, guess what? Hate crime sentencing guideline applies. Now you get 3 to 5 for punching that nigga in the face. Whereas white men who essentially are not allowed to use the word nigga and don't generally use the word nigga, not as much as black men do, he'll punch another white man in the face and get a year probation because hate crime sentencing guidelines would not apply to his case because he's never been documented as being a person to use a racial slur of any kind or express any type of bias motivation. So as black men, when we call each other nigga, what we're doing is we're expressing a racial slur, which sets the stage for the claim of bias motivation if we were to ever come before a judge for sentencing for a violent crime. I don't know if you guys understand what I'm saying. So I'll say it a different way. The use of the word nigga was popularized and casualized amongst black people. And because of that, a lot of the street element amongst black people use that word more than anybody. So if the cops arrest a young black man for shooting another young black man, and that young black man is on social media talking about niggas this, niggas that, yeah, I shot that nigga. Or let's say he's in the interrogation room and he confesses and he said, yeah, I shot that nigga. Then guess what that says? Guess what that means? That means the prosecution now has a statement where you used a racial slur in reference to your victim. So in the prosecution's closing arguments, they'll read that quote to the judge. And during his interrogation, he even confessed and said, yeah, I shot that nigga. The judge now takes note of that. Sentencing date comes around. The judge will sentence you to a much longer, much harsher prison sentence because of the hate crime guidelines and never say a word to you that you're being sentenced under the hate crime guidelines. So as a black man, you just see yourself getting more time than the white man who did the exact same thing, and you have no idea why, so you just chalk it up to racism. I'm black, so they throw the book at me. He's white, so they let him off the hook. But that's not the case. It's because of your casual use of the word nigga, which establishes for the prosecution bias motivation, which now allows the judge, under his own discretion, to apply hate crime sentencing guidelines to your sentence. Thus, more black men get longer prison sentences than their non-black counterparts. So the next big question, shout out to Andrew P. He said we need to fix Democrat states and defund. I guess he meant to say defund them. I agree. So we got two supporters. Andrew P. Are you my nephew, Andrew? I think that's my nephew, y'all. Just put a 1 in the chat if you nephew, man. If you're not nephew, put a 2. I don't want to get it confused and be calling a grown 50-year-old man watching my show enjoying the content nephew. But I think that's my nephew because his last initial is P. Neff, that's you? So anyway, before I continue or before I get sidetracked, if that is my nephew, that is the only blood relative of mine that has ever watched my show, much yet contributed to my show. That's why I got so excited. But anyway, there's only 2 remedies to this situation where these hate crime sentencing guidelines have been weaponized against black people. And the 2 remedies are this: either black people stop using the word nigga, or we advocate for the abolishment of the hate crime laws and hate crime sentencing guidelines. Those are our 2 options. Now, my opinion is this: we abolish the hate crime laws and the hate crime sentencing guidelines. Because crime is crime, and all crimes should be punished. The affording the government more power to punish people more harshly for the exact same crimes because of what that perpetrator, what that defendant might think or feel, I think it's criminalizing free speech. And as an advocate of free speech, I would never advise the people to stop saying a certain word because you might go to jail longer for it. I think that's anti-American. I think that's anti-free speech. And as an advocate for free speech, I can never take the position of, well, we can stop these enhanced sentences for black men if we just tell black men to stop saying nigga. That's essentially telling black people we have to limit our free speech now. So let's let the government, the hate crime laws that give the government more unnecessary, excessive power over us, let's let those laws stand and let's limit our own free speech. I don't like that option. I like option B better. Let's strip the government of that power to criminalize free speech. So it's either we limit our free speech or we limit government authority. You see what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? Andrew P. says, Citizen Man, Democrat cities, states, and counties need to be fixed. Stop federalizing crime not mentioned in the Constitution. Stop giving power never granted. How about federal lynching law? Charlotte hoax. Yeah, the anti-lynching law was passed by the Democrats because they were afraid that Trump was going to have them hung for treason. That's why they did that. And funny thing is, if they're not going to be hung for treason, they're going to be put in front of a firing squad instead. So either way, but those are our options. And I say option B, strip the government of its power to criminalize our free speech. And when I first brought this up on a public platform, it was on Brother Sanchez's platform of all places. And I said that hate crime laws need to be removed from the books. And I tried to explain how the hate crime laws are being used against black men. And I was pretty much laughed off the stage. Like everybody thought it was a joke. Even Brother Sanchez thought it was a joke, thought it was funny. And he said, so you mean to tell me that the judges check your nigga history before they sentence you? And the answer is yes, they do. Yes, they do. Yes, the fuck they do. And if they can find one social media post of yours where you use the word nigga, you have now committed a hate crime as far as they're concerned. And when these hate crime laws were written, it was passed under the guise of being protections for black people. But what black people fail to realize is the federal government, thanks to the integration and the anti-discrimination laws, the federal government cannot make laws that are race specific. So they passed these laws under the guise that these laws are going to be used against racist whites in protection of blacks. But black people fail to realize that these laws also can be used against blacks. And today we see these laws being used against blacks. Because we've adopted the word nigga into our lexicon, which in the eyes of the courts is nothing more than a racial slur. So if we have laws on the books that provide for enhanced sentences for people that use racial slurs, well, in order to protect ourselves, we have to abolish these laws that were supposed to protect us, but are now being used as a weapon against us. That is the only way to preserve our free speech and our right to say the word nigga if we want to. Now, there's other brothers out there and other folks out there that might say, well, I think black people should stop calling each other niggas anyway because we're more than niggas. We're more than that. And I agree. I agree. But again, as a proponent of free speech, when it comes to the law and the legality of it, the right to say it, must be preserved. The choice to say it is solely up to the individual. But that individual, whether they choose to say it or not, should always reserve the right to say it if they so wish, because that is the essence of free speech. And what the hate crime sentencing guidelines have done was essentially criminalize free speech. Oh, Andrew finally answered me. He says, I'm not your nephew. All right, appreciate that. Thoughts on Emmett Till? I don't know. I mean, what do you want me to say about it? It was fucked up. They did that boy dirty. And it was Democrats that did that to him. It was fucked up. So when you raise this subject to the average black person and you tell them the hate crime laws are being used against black people and it's the hate crime sentencing guidelines that stemmed from the hate crime laws that are resulting in black men getting longer prison sentences, their initial reaction is to think you're crazy and not believe you. Until you do the research and you show them the research. Thoughts on Eisenhower? I don't really care for Eisenhower. I mean, Eisenhower helped facilitate the Zionist state and all that shit, but, you know, I don't really care much about Eisenhower. But again, if we're able to articulate this and more effectively explain this to folks, then we'll be able to get more people to see where we're coming from and understand the importance of free speech versus the perception of government protection. Shout out to D. Allen for the Cash App. He says, salute, citizen man, flat motherfucking power. So we got 3 supporters on the board so far. That's what's up. We got 3 supporters. We got 1 Super Chat, 1 Cash App, and 1 Venmo. That's what's up. But we need more. We need more. What's up, Deborah? Peace to you. Peace to you. I hope you didn't miss the whole show. So if you were to have a conversation with somebody about this subject, right? Here's how I would break it down to them in the simplest terms. Black people advocated for hate crime laws and hate crime sentencing guidelines to be put on the books because the racist white people were running around attacking them and calling them niggers. They got the hate crime laws passed. The hate crime sentencing guidelines were then written up based on the hate crime laws. And any use of a racial slur now affords the judge the ability, whether the crime is prosecuted as a hate crime or not, the judge can sentence it as a hate crime, depending on whether this person is known to use racial slurs or exhibit some sort of bias motivation. With the normalization of the use of the word nigga amongst black folks and the court's definition of that word as a racial slur, black folks tend to get longer prison sentences because of their use of the word nigga. Because if a black man calls another black man who he commits a violent crime against a nigga, that's still a racial slur. There's still racial bias. Even though the crime is within the same race, the perpetrator is still using a racial slur against his victim. Damn, Deborah, they did you dirty on YouTube, man. They play games like that. They play like that. Deborah says, I just saw you was live, and the last live, by the time I got on, you was getting off. Yeah, I remember that. Just know this. My start times are 10:30 p.m. or 10:45 p.m. Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. When I do the collabs with B Miles, we try to go live a little earlier, like 9. And I'm doing a collab with B Miles tomorrow night. We're going to be talking about the mass migration, the open borders, and the deportations. But tonight I did it. I decided to do my own thing. So what caused the justice system, partly what caused the justice system, the judicial system to become so broken was too many people looking to government to solve their problems and to protect them. And all that does is gives the government more power to do whatever they want to do to you. And that's where we go wrong. Because instead of running to the government to write laws to protect black people from racist white people, what the black people should have been doing was running to the government to enhance policing to prevent these hate crimes from even happening in the first place. And they should have ran to the government for protections under the Second Amendment so they can arm themselves to protect themselves against these racists, rather than the government write laws to prosecute these racists. Because those same laws that were supposed to prosecute and give enhanced sentences to the racists are now being used to give enhanced sentences to the black folks. And that's not the way it was supposed to be. Shout out to Deborah Ticey for the Cash App. Appreciate you, Deborah. Appreciate the support. We got 4 on the board. One more, make it 5, and then we could get on to try to get the second 5. We're at 4, so that's pretty good. It's pretty decent. But you see, a lot of black folks are still under the belief that these hate crime sentencing guidelines and these hate crime laws, one, are one and the same. 2, the guidelines only apply when the case is being prosecuted as a hate crime. And 3, these laws are actually meant to protect them. They really believe that. So they will advocate for the upholding of these laws, which amount to nothing more than criminalization of our freedom of speech. And then you got the dummies out there that would allow this excessive government power to stand and demand that we, the people, limit our free speech in order to protect ourselves against the weaponization of this expansion of government. Which means as government expands, our rights contract. So in order to uphold and protect ourselves from this expansion of government, we're now contracting our right to freedom of speech. I don't think that's the way to go to solve this. The way to go to solve this is to strip the government of their power. And you see, this is something that I would like to see Trump do. And if I could sit down with Trump and explain this and break this down to him, he would want to do it. But he'd be afraid to do it. You know why? Because that'll be the media's green light to start calling him racist again, saying that he's trying to get rid of the protections for black people so the racist white people can start attacking them again. That's what they'll say. That's the narrative they'll push. Because they know that the vast majority of Americans don't understand how this legislation has been weaponized against them. So they'll advocate for the criminalization of their own free speech before they advocate for their own free speech. All because they're paralyzed in fear of racism, which is stupid. Because a racist person is going to be a racist person regardless of whether the law says they can or they can't. Just like a murderer is going to be a murderer, even though there's laws on the books that say you shouldn't murder. You can't murder. A thief is going to steal, even though there's laws on the books that say thieves aren't allowed to steal. So putting laws on the books to criminalize people for saying racist words is not going to stop people from saying racist words. But what it is going to do is it's going to allow the justice system to target the specific group of people who use this racial slur casually, more casually than any other group. And that group just so happens to be the very same group that the system is intending on incarcerating and removing from society anyway. So by having these laws on the books, we just gave them the green light to do that. And anybody that defends these laws is defending the government having excessive power that was not granted to them by the Constitution. So they'll be essentially working against their own best interest. Now, does anybody have anything to say about this? If you do, what I will do is I will drop the link in the chat, and hopefully somebody will come up. Exactly, DC Legendary. It's a trap. It was a trap. It is a trap. So anybody want to come up and chop it up with your boy, you're more than welcome. So, Deborah, what you missed was my breakdown of the hate crime sentencing guidelines being the root cause for why black men get longer prison sentences than their non-black counterparts for the exact same violent crimes. What I was explaining was the majority of people are under the impression that it's due to racism. And I was explaining that it's more than just racism. It's this bad legislation that's allowing for this racial disparity in the sentencing. And the racial disparity came about because of the normalization of the use of the word nigga by black folks. And because of the court's definition being a racial slur, whether it's the hard ER or the A or the AH, it's all the same word to them in the eyes of the courts. And that word means racial slur. That word is defined as a racial slur. So when you have a black man that commits a violent crime and he's known to use the word nigga, he gets subject to the sentencing, to the hate crime sentencing guidelines, even though his criminal proceedings, his court proceedings was not a hate crime prosecution. So he was prosecuted as if it was just a regular everyday violent crime, not a big special hate crime, right? But when he gets sentenced as if it's a big hate crime. Thus, the black man that punches another man in the face gets 3 to 5 years in prison, whereas the white man that punches the black man in the face or punches another man in the face gets a year of probation. That's why. Because white people don't generally use the word nigga, at least not openly and publicly as black people do. But because we do, we're now subject to the hate crime sentencing guidelines. And because of the judicial process, the judges are supposed to, and the prosecutors are supposed to inform the defense that there will be a hate crime sentencing enhancement, placed on your sentence because of X, Y, and Z, because you referred to the victim as a nigga, or certain witnesses heard you talking about the crime, in reference to the victim as a nigga or whatnot. So these guidelines will apply to your sentence. They're supposed to tell them that, but they don't tell them that. They give them the impression that it's a normal criminal proceeding and that the sentencing will be normal, when in fact the sentencing, being at the judge's own discretion, can result in a longer sentence because of the hate crime sentencing guidelines if the judge takes it upon himself to apply these guidelines. So what I was saying, I don't know if you caught this part, Deborah, but the remedies, there's only two ways to remedy this. Either we limit our free speech and stop saying nigga, or we limit the government's power and abolish the hate crime laws and the hate crime sentencing guidelines. Those are our only two options. And I choose abolishment of the law. And anybody that, if you agree, if you disagree, the link is in the chat. So you guys can click that link and jump on the show and come talk to me. And this is why I don't really like to do call-in shows, because nobody ever calls in. And y'all make me sad when y'all do that. I feel alone and left out. I feel abandoned. Deborah Ticey says, that was a great breakdown. I choose option 2. Yeah. Yeah, and most freedom-loving Americans would choose option 2, because the more power we give to the government is the less rights we reserve for ourselves. And the more power we take away from the government is the more expansive our rights become. Because in a nation that's supposed to be a constitutional republic, where freedom of expression is the first point in the Bill of Rights, limiting our own expression is antithetical to what the Bill of Rights allows us to do. Deborah says, don't feel like that. I was just kidding, Deborah. I don't really feel like that. I was just trying to guilt y'all into getting on the show. That's what I was doing, but I guess it didn't work. And again, that's why I choose to strip the government of that power. Now, how do we convince Black people that this would be the right way to go? That's an uphill battle, because again, too many Black folks believe that these laws were put on the books to protect them, and they're not being weaponized against them. It's just racism is the reason why Black men get longer prison sentences than their non-Black counterparts for the same crimes. And as long as people keep believing that, this problem will never get solved. The only way to solve the problem is to find the root of the problem. Because if it was racism to blame, what you would see is a consistent pattern of white judges handing down these longer sentences and Black judges not so much. But what we see instead is Black judges and white judges alike are doing the exact same thing when it comes to these sentences. So there has to be more to it than just skin color. And in examining the hate crime legislation, that would be the hate crime laws and the guidelines, we now found the underlying reason for this phenomenon that we see. Deborah says, I got a slight cold, so I sound like a frog right now. Well, let's not rip it up the show then. I hope you get better, Deborah. You know any home remedies? I'm sure you do. You better whip something up fast, girl. It's winter. It's cold, and it ain't getting no warmer. At least not for a while. But yeah, man, anybody want to come up, holler at your boy, come on up. Andrew P says, education needs to be fully privatized. New York City gun laws suck. Gun-free zones need to end. Public education is failing and needs to go. Yeah, I agree with you, Andrew. But here's the thing. Not everybody can afford to send their kids to private school. So public school wouldn't be an option for everybody. But what can be done is some real serious reforms with the public school system, because Democrats control the departments of education in every state. So if we get rid of the departments of education, or at least get rid of the Democrats that control the departments of education, we'll see more education happening than indoctrination. Because the Democrat Party is the party of brainwashing. They are the party of total control. They are the party of groupthink. And if these are the types of people in charge of our educational system, of course, we won't have much of an educational system to speak of, which is the case currently. So some major seat changes need to happen in the Department of Education. and the public school system can actually be fixed. You see, the infrastructure is great. They got the facilities, they got the staffing, they got the transport, they got everything. The only thing they don't have is a proper curriculum, because the curriculum is being written by political hacks. So you remove the political hacks from that system and from that infrastructure, and you put in a proper curriculum that's educational based, you'll see better results. Because remember, the public school system wasn't always this fucked up. Andrew P. says, when is the quantum financial system coming to us? That is a great question. The quantum financial system wouldn't be coming to us. We would be going to it. We would be joining it. And we will not be able to join the quantum financial system until we do that swap from fiat currency to gold-backed currency. And we will probably be one of the last nations on earth to do that. So it won't be for another couple of years, I presume. Deborah Ticey says, I heard in California and some states, 6 months in, 6 months out of school very soon. I think part of what they also need to do in the public school system is bring back physical education and bring back the vocational trades like wood shop and all, and technology class and all that shit. They need to bring that back, in home economics, where we used to bake cookies and shit. We need to bring all that shit back. Man, I used to love home ec, man. It was just something about seeing them girls with them aprons on, boy. I was like, I like this class. Can't bake cookies for shit, but I'm fucking with it. I am here. That was one class I was never late to. And I was glad I took it. All my boys was like, bro, don't take home ec. That's for girls and shit. I was like, that's exactly why I'm taking it, because that's where the girls are. So y'all could be up in wood shop with a bunch of dudes. Y'all cool with that? I'm cool with that. But I'm going to home ec. I'm putting my apron and my chef's hat on, and I'm kicking it with the girls, Jack. Can't bake. I couldn't even pop popcorn without burning that shit. But I got a whole bunch of phone numbers, though. I'll tell you that. I tell you that. You know what? Even back then, that's when I realized I was a traditional male, because it was just something about seeing them pretty girls in the kitchen that was just like, it was a turn on. It was a turn on. Like, they used to try to clown me and shit, like, you take your whole back, you got an apron on, nigga, making fun of me. And I used to reach in my apron pocket and pull out a piece of paper with like 7 phone numbers on it, and then be like, how many you got? I used to be up in there trying to put my bid in with all the girlies, and it worked. And the best part about it was like a class of 20, but it was only like 3 dudes and 17 girls. So we had free reign, and the other 2 dudes were kind of like shy and introverted and nerdy, or one of them would be gay or some shit. So I had all the girls to myself. And it was crazy because they weren't that many boys in the class, the girls were just as excited to have boys in the class with them as we were to be in the class full of girls. So it worked out great for everybody. Everybody won. I still don't know how to bake to this day. But I took home ec all through middle school, though. And a little bit of high school before they cut that shit out. I used to love that shit, man. I used to love going to that class. And that was the one class we did not have a textbook for. We didn't have a textbook, nor did we have homework. We just got to kick it with the girls for an hour. That shit was awesome. Deborah Ticey says, I loved economics class. Every Friday we cooked in groups, but we studied the recipes. Yummy. Yeah, man, I used to love that shit. And I like to cook. I cook my ass off. I make a hell of a beef stew with some beef curry and shit. You know what I'm saying? I'm a bit of a grill master. I still struggle with my steaks, though. I struggle with my steaks because I don't buy the pre-cut steaks. I'll buy the whole roast, the whole slab, and I'd cut my own steaks, right? So sometimes when I cut them too thin, they'll get overcooked. And when I cut them too thick, they'll be undercooked. So I'm still trying to figure out the perfect size to cut them down to get that perfect sear on the outside, but that nice bright pink color on the inside where it's soft and it's chewy. But I did learn this though. Cooking steaks in the pan is a lot easier because you can regulate the temperature better than cooking them on the grill. That's one. And two, the way you know that you got a perfectly cooked steak is when you eat it and you don't get that much meat stuck between your teeth. That means the meat is tender and it breaks down as you chew it. If the meat still got some toughness or some rigidity to it, it's going to get lodged between your teeth. So if you eat a steak and you getting all kind of meat stuck between your teeth, that shit ain't cooked right. But if you're eating a steak and it's just melting in your mouth, that shit is cooked right. And I love steak too. And as much as I love steak, you would think I would be a master at cooking steak, but I can't say it. I think I'm average. Yeah, my kitchen be filthy after I cook. My kitchen be a hot mess. I am not that clean or organized as a person. I must say I'm a bit of a slob. But that's because my mind runs at 100 miles an hour. So when I'm doing one thing, I'm thinking about 50 other things. So I do what I got to do. Like when I'm working on shit and I'm using my tools, I literally spend more time looking for tools that I need than actually using the tools once I find them. And that's always been a problem of mine. That's why I need a good assistant or a good secretary to keep my shit organized for me. If I had that, I'd be on top of the world every day. You know? Yeah, that's how it be. That's how it is. But you know what they say? When it comes to males, because women tend to be more organized by, just naturally anyway, right? But men who are more high functioning and of higher intelligence and are more creative tend to be more disorganized. And I don't know why that is. And I can't explain it, but that's just the way it is. And that's just the way it's always been. And I can't speak for everybody, but for myself, I can say I'm extremely creative, but I'm extremely disorganized too. And it's hard for me to stay organized. It is. Like I do laundry and it'll be a week before I put my clothes away. Like I literally live out of my clean laundry basket for like a week before I put my clothes away. It's terrible. I know it's terrible. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible habit. Now, when it comes to my fly clothes, those get put up. My shoes get kept clean. You know what I'm saying? But when it comes to like my work clothes or like my regular, everyday clothes, like I don't really bother with that shit too much. But I don't know. Now that I'm single, I'm gonna have to work that out because my lady used to help me with all that, but my lady ain't my lady no more. So now I got to do it myself. I don't know, Deborah. I don't even know how you get those crowns and those icons. I don't know. I don't think I have any control over whether you get that or not. DC Legendary got one. Andrew P got one. And I have no idea. Deborah Ticey says we could not stay with each other. No, we couldn't. That's why I got to be alone. I have to live alone. I have to. I take up too much space. I got too much shit. Like living by myself, I need a bare minimum. And this is bare minimum. 3-bedroom house, 2-car garage, storage shed, carport. I need all that. 2 vehicles, 2 trailers, 5 different sets of tools. Like, I need space. I take up a lot of space. I'm not a big guy, but I come with a lot of shit. I have a lot of assets, and I have to store them properly to maintain their value. But yeah, man. So I see nobody's really wanting to call in, which is cool. I didn't really have too long of a show for you guys tonight. We are at the 2.5 hour mark. But just to sum it up, the broken judicial system, how did this happen? This happened because the people decided that giving the government more power was going to result in their protection. And it ended up resulting in legislation that's now weaponized against them. The very same people who this legislation was said to protect. And the only way to fix it is to abolish the legislation. Because as long as that legislation exists, the hate crime legislation, that is, there will always be a way to weaponize it against whichever group they choose to weaponize it against. So by abolishing that legislation, you basically take the bullets out of the gun. Oh, we're going to talk about that tomorrow, Deborah. Me and B Miles going to talk about that tomorrow. We're live. We're going to be live tomorrow night at 9 p.m. So it's going to be early. So make sure you guys tap in early. And we're going to do it the same way we did it last time, where we're going to stream from my channel, on my channel and his channel, but I'll be the host of the show so I can provide the visuals. And I'm going to have B Miles send me some visuals so I can pull up for him while he breaks it all down. So tune in tomorrow night at 9 p.m. We're doing another collab, and we're going to talk about the deportations, Deborah, because that needs to be talked about. You're on the West Coast? Well, I guess so, because if you're Mountain or Pacific time, then yeah, because we're East Coast time. 9 p.m. Wait. 6 o'clock, 9 p.m. our time. Oh, yeah, because you're behind us, so you'll be earlier than we are. Andrew P. says, Citizen Man, thoughts on Robert Taft? I know Kamala got sent to Gitmo. Is Tim Walz. I don't know who Robert Taft is. You're asking me about all these people. I really don't know. I've heard the name before, Andrew P. I've heard the name before, but I'm not sure who Robert Taft is. And Tim Walz, I don't know what's going to happen to Tim Walz. He might just end up going to federal prison for helping the Somalis commit all that food stamp fraud that they were committing. And it's funny how they're all, and this is part of what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So, in West Coast, Cali. Okay, Deborah. I don't want to get into it too deeply, but this is what we're going to talk about tomorrow. It's funny how all these Somalis now are mad because Trump is basically ending their temporary protected status. Obama brought them all over here and gave them temporary protected status, meaning they were allowed to stay in the United States temporarily. For some reason, they don't understand the difference between permanent and temporary. Well, that temporary protected status is now over, and you motherfuckers got to go. And now they're all up in arms and they're mad. Sorry, can't help you. And they've been committing millions and millions of dollars worth of food stamp fraud, robbing the American taxpayer of what should be rightfully theirs. And we have American families out there that are struggling to keep up with their bills and keep food on the table, while these foreigners, these Somali motherfuckers, are buying fucking Teslas and mansions off of our food stamp money. So yeah, get them out of here. Get them all out of here. But anyway. Yeah, we're at 2 hours and 34 minutes. I think I'm gonna wrap it up tonight. I hope what I shared with you guys tonight actually made sense to you and gave you a deeper understanding of how, asking the government to save us and asking them for help is usually to our detriment. And this is why Ronald Reagan made that famous statement that he said is the 5 words every American fears the most is I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I think it was 5 words or 7 words. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. 9 words. Because the government is not here to help us. The government is here to rule over us. And we have to, as the people, have to help ourselves. And one of the ways that we can help ourselves is by, 1, electing proper representation, 2, getting politically involved on every level, not just casting the ballots, but on the side of the people counting the ballots as well, running for office ourselves, and learning how legislation works, how it's applied, and how it's being weaponized and we're being taken advantage of. Because you can't de-rig a system if you don't understand the riggings of that system. So step 1 is to gain an understanding of the riggings of the system. And step 2 is to infiltrate and de-rig that system. Otherwise, that system will continue to function as a weapon against the people. And as time goes by, it will only become more and more effective against us and more difficult to stop it. Yeah, the Somalis, they had a whole ring set up where what they would do is they would apply for food stamps, right? And they would get food stamps, and other Somalis would open up stores, right? And in those stores, they would jack up the prices and overcharge the other Somalis with the food stamps. So when the Somalis that get the food stamps come shop at the Somali store, the Somali store owner is making money hand over fist from the Somali food stamp holders. And in some cases, when they make enough money, they would actually give back dividends to their shoppers. So the Somalis were collecting food stamps and they were using fake paperwork to collect the food stamps. They were lying on their applications saying that they're not making any money when they're working really good jobs or running businesses. And they were just straight defrauding the system. And a lot of that money that they were stealing, get this, it gets even worse. A lot of that money they were stealing was being funneled back to Somalia to Muslim terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab. So not only were they over here defrauding the American taxpayer, but the money that they were defrauding the American taxpayers of, they were using to fund terrorist organizations back in Africa. So now we have a population of Somalis that are not just migrants to the country that no longer have legal status, but they were aiding and abetting terrorism. And we got people getting on TV saying that the Somalis being removed from the country is a black issue. No, the fuck it ain't. Because ain't no black people getting removed from the country that's Americans. So it's not a black issue. It's a Somali issue. And last time I checked, we don't give a fuck about Somalian and Somalis. We just don't want them here living high off the hog on our backs. But I got to save that for tomorrow because I could get into it and go a whole nother hour. I don't want to do it because got to save something for tomorrow because tomorrow's going to be lit. So make sure you guys tune into either my channel or B Miles 84's channel and catch us 9 p.m. We're going to be going early. All right. So 9 p.m. And we're going to open, and I'm going to see if he wants to open the call lines to let people in. Because I really want to get you guys' take on a lot of this shit. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to the hate crimes, I want to hear opposing opinions. I want to hear what other people have to say about this. Because I really want to know if people truly understand what I just explained to you in this show. It's a lot bigger than just racism, and the people who want you to believe it's racism, they're misleading you so you can keep fighting a fight that you don't need to be fighting. How somebody feels about the color of your skin has no bearing on the outcome of your life. But how the judicial system treats you compared to your non-black counterparts has a very profound effect on your life. And that's something worth noting, and that's something worth paying attention to. And that's something worth taking the time to understand. Because they've been getting away with it for this long because of our lack of understanding of it. So now that we've gotten a better understanding of it, now we can start taking steps to prevent them from weaponizing the justice system against us. Thank you, Deborah. Deborah says, you go deep. Here's some flowers. Here's some flowers, bro. I learned so much from you. Well, thank you, Deborah. I appreciate that. Yeah, because remember, the enemy that we're dealing with, they operate on a deeper level. They just show you the shit on the surface level to deceive you, to fool you, and throw you off their tracks. But once you start peeling back those layers and you start digging a little deeper, you start to see the playbook for what it is. And there ain't no question about what you're looking at. But anyway, I appreciate you guys being here. Let me go ahead and close us out the right way. Send us home proper. Don't forget, make sure you guys go subscribe to the Citizen Man backup channel. If you haven't subscribed to the backup channel, please make sure you do. I keep the backup channel, but it doesn't have that much content on it. It's just there just in case we get zapped. Oh shit, we have our 5 supporters. My sister Angela hit me on the Citizen Man Cash App. I guess that's the only Cash App that you have saved in your history, Angela, because I got to keep jumping back and forth between Jaden Ben and Citizen Man now to make sure I don't miss you. But appreciate that support, my sister. That's awesome. So make sure you guys subscribe to the backup channel in case they zap me on Citizen Man TV. You can find me over here on Citizen Man. Also, follow me on Rumble because Rumble won't zap me because they don't censor like YouTube. So get over to Rumble to check out all the other shows that you can't find on YouTube because of the censorship. Also, last but not least, if you guys would like to support the show by sending in a kind donation, you could do so via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo by using the tag scrolling across the screen in the banner below, the links that are pinned to the top of the YouTube chat in the black box where it says Citizen Man TV in yellow. Just click the yellow, the box opens up, and all the links are there. And you can find those very same links in the description box of every video on YouTube and Rumble. All right, I want to give a big shout out to my sister Angela. On the Cash App, she says, telling the truth. And let me switch back to my Jaden Ben account. Shout out to Sister Deborah with the gift, and shout out to D. Allen. He says, salute, flat mother effing power. Appreciate you, D. Allen. Shout out to my sister Elsine on the Venmo. Sister Elsine says, let me see what sister said. What my sister had to say to your boy, man. Shit. I can't find the comment. Why not? All right. I'm going to have to go back to my text messages to see that. Elsine says, best wishes. Appreciate you, Elsine. Who else we got? We had a super chat from Andrew P. Yep, shout out to Andrew P for the super chat. He says, we needed to fix Democrat states and defund them. Appreciate you, my brother. And is that 5? Angela, Deborah, Elsine, D. Allen, Andrew. Yep, that's 5. All right, so it looks like we hit our 5 supporter goal for the night. So anybody else that wants to support the show, hey, I got no problem with you. And I hope that, you see much financial success in the future, because the more money you make is the more money you can donate to your boy. Yeah, so I want you to win so you can help me win. That's all. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But anyway, guys, Deborah says, don't leave. It's Friday. Anyway, I'm kind of running out of content here, so I don't want to sit here and just keep rambling for another hour. So I'm going to go ahead and shut it down. For those of you that tuned in late, you can always go back and watch it from the start. I covered some unrelated news, so if you tuned in like Deborah, if you came in late and you missed the beginning of the show, you could definitely go back and watch the rest of it, which I'm sure you will, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. Some things you might agree with, some things you might disagree with, but whatever the case may be, as long as you get the information, you get the information. That's all that matters to me. Whether you agree with me or not, well, that's of little consequence. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate the love and the support. And again, it's of little consequence whether you agree or not, because I would rather you just hear my side of it than only have one side and nothing else to compare it to. So what I say might either confirm what you believe or debunk what you believe and get you to change your mind. But either way, whatever it is you believe is being put to the test. And I think that is one of the most intelligent things a person can do, which is challenge their own beliefs. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the love. I appreciate the support. And I will see you on the next one. Matter of fact, I'll see you tomorrow night at 9 p.m. I'll be live with B Miles. All right. So make sure you guys tune in early. Prime time. Citizen Man out.